Excellent. An ale for me. And for my officers. In fact, ales for everyone.
10 Backward. With Rick and Will and Gemma.
Oh, yes.
Hello, welcome to a new episode of 10 Backwards. I'm your host, Rick Everson. To one side of me is my fellow host, Gemma Turland.
Hello.
Further around the table is Will Turland.
Hello.
And then in the other direction is Rick Palmer.
Bonjour.
And we're joined by a guest for our discussion today. We've got Ross with us. Hi, Ross.
Hello. How are you guys?
We're good. How are you?
Very good. Very good. I don't know whether I'm left or right of you, though. I'm definitely south. But
you're directly in front of me.
Oh, God. Okay.
Feels like we have a living laptop.
Yes, called Ross.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe later on we can argue with Ross and Steve will come out. He'll say no.
I feel like an 80s sidekick.
So you tell the effect we'll have to draw a beard on the laptop.
Yeah.
Listeners may be familiar with Ross from his own podcast, Snap Trek, which is pretty excellent. Not even just buttering him up. I really love it. It's well better than this shit. But please don't listen to this.
Hey, what?
I'm joking. It's mildly better than this.
He's not joking. I can see in his eyes he means it.
I love your guys' podcast. I listen every week.
Oh, thanks.
There you go.
This is a proper loving in this episode, except for what you said about hating our podcast.
We actually, in fact, blamed Ross on a previous episode for our subject. I think we did pets, didn't we?
We did, because we'd made a joke when we were all in Destination Star Trek. We'd made a joke about the sort of most banal subject we could podcast on, and Ross said, "No, it's a good idea. Do it. I'd listen to that."
It's highbrow, and I did listen to it, and I enjoyed it.
Brilliant.
The Pets of Star Trek. I don't think there was any you missed out. I thought it was a comprehensive pet list. There was that sort of weird Twiggy thing that Alexander has. I don't know if you mentioned that. And then later on, I think Grand Nagus Zek has it as well. That little Twiggy sort of puppet.
Oh, was it Corbin Gilvos or something like that?
I don't know. I just called it the weird twig.
That's a good point. Do you know, I remember that.
Yeah.
It didn't crop up in my research.
Well,
no. But there's a hilarious scene near the end of the episode of Next Gen with Alexander, where there's been a fire, and so Worf and Riker have gone in. Worf's rescued Alexander, is there with his son, so pleased. And there's Riker at the side, like gasping and all like sooty, holding this like twig, trying to look like
a particularly flammable animal made entirely of wood.
Yes. I think Frakes really sells it. It really looks like he saved a living.
Other than my mission, I was very pleased with the Pets episode, and I did not consider it banal. I thought it was very, very decent.
Oh, well, some kind words.
I'm crying. You can't see it. I'm crying.
Words. But of course, we're not here to talk about pets tonight.
We're not. We're going to talk about the best of both worlds. The Next Generation two-parter where the Borg arrive in Federation space. This is just one that I've definitely wanted to talk about for a long time. I'm a massive fan of this story. So having Ross on seemed a very good point to get talking about it. So we'll kick things off. This is a pretty big event. So I just thought I'd go around. Anyone got any distinct memories of watching this the first time?
Yes. No. What? Yeah, sorry, go Rick.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my memories are just that it was the time when Star Trek: The Next Generation was on BBC Two, and it was a big because it was a massive cliffhanger in between parts 1 and 2. I remember waiting around for part 2 to come around a long time, and then it did, and then that was it for TNG for a while because it moved to another channel.
Yeah.
So in terms of my memories, I remember loving it, but I distinctly remember it makes me think of watching it on BBC Two in my bedroom on a small TV. Yeah. And really wanting it to come back and find out what happened. Is your memory of it soured by the fact that
that after that BBC Two lost TNG for a while?
I think I was not really. I mean, it was just something that happened. With TV, it just tended to be. I didn't think about it much beyond having four. I think it was 4 channels then.
We
God,
did
yeah,
only have 4 back then. Yeah.
So I was disappointed, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like the internet was around. I just kind of, and I think not long after there were other TV shows that came around that I really liked, and it was only a few years later that there was the X-Files and stuff like that. So, but I distinctly remember wanting to be able to watch Best of Both Worlds Part 2 as soon as possible.
Did not know that
I
had
was
happened.
relieved the BBC had made a special arrangement. They could have episode 1 of series 4 before Sky took the exclusive rights away for a long time.
I did not know that had happened because I remember watching the Best of Both Worlds on television, the first part, and then I don't recall watching it. I don't recall seeing what happened at the end. I presume that Picard was okay, but I didn't realise that it's because there'd been a channel shift. I guess I was just so caught up with watching the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or whatever they replaced it with.
Yeah.
Well, what BBC Two put on on the Wednesday at 6:00 in place of Next Generation was original series. So my disappointment was tempered because this was now my chance to catch up on the original, which I hadn't seen prior to that. I was new in for Next Gen, so I could survive that rough patch by watching some classic Trek. I thought, but I think my overriding memory is. It literally haunted my dreams the week of that cliffhanger, waiting for part 2. I distinctly remember a dream of watching part 2, and there was a weird storyline where the Enterprise had withdrawn straight back to Earth, and the crew were assembled at Starfleet headquarters watching old footage of Kirk's Enterprise fighting a weird cube ship, and everyone going, "Oh, so Kirk's already fought the Borg. What can we learn from that?" And then Picard stands up and he's in disguise as normal Picard, but he was still Locutus, and I think he actually killed Dr. Crusher in my dream.
Oh my goodness!
I know it was like seriously a weird dream. I was like,
that sounds like an incredible part 2. They should have made that. That's good.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't. They would have killed Dr. Crusher.
That's true. I mean, I remember finding this episode incredibly exciting, and I think at this point TNG was always, I guess it was always entertaining and sort of thought provoking and really interesting. It wasn't necessarily always thrilling. Not every episode was completely gripping and kind of edge of your seat tension. I remember sort of getting to the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1, just thinking, oh my god, that was really exciting. That was an exciting episode of Star Trek.
That was like a movie almost. For when you compare to how a lot of episodes would have 1-2 phaser shots shown on screen, quite a lot of off-screen phaser shots. If we got as far as a battle, most battles resolved by Picard speechifying. Not a bad thing. Always love Picard's speech, but in terms of what we got to see there was loads of stuff going on.
There's a Borg cutting beam.
Yeah, we had 2 distinct space battles and a running firefight on the Borg ship in the space of one 45-minute episode.
Shields are being drained. 90%? 80.
Trying to recalibrate mutation. Damn!
Shields have failed. Fire all weapons.
Even the slower moments, they clip along at a fair pace. You have Riker's career introspection, but that doesn't slow the episode down.
Yeah,
I think so. It's always it is a really exciting. Certainly, the first part is really exciting. Does not stop.
Do you remember when you watched Q Who the first time? At the end of that, did you have expectations that we'd see the Borg again? Because I don't remember. To be honest, I don't really remember watching Q Who.
I don't remember. My big memory of the Borg is Best of Both Worlds. I don't remember whether I'd seen Q Who at that point or not. Actually, How about you, Gemma?
I think my memory of the Borg is Q Who.
Oh, okay.
TNG, because I think just the devastation of this species that they have no defense of, and I think that stuck with me.
I remember being terrified by Q-Who.
Mm.
I can't honestly remember having an expectation of the Borg ever coming up again. However, back in those days, they had a Star Trek magazine that I would pick up when I could, which was maybe 2-3 interviews and reprint of the DC Comics run back in the 80s. And that had a letters page, and on that, one of the editor's responses to a letter, because someone asked about the Borg, was that at the end of Series 3, the Borg would be back, and they'd take Picard and turn him into one of them. Which, looking back, I was like, I should have been furious.
It's a bit of
Spoiler.
Just post the entire script. Right?
Yeah.
But I was just incredibly excited, and I think about the point that came out, we were maybe at halfway into Series 3. So I knew it was coming, and counting the weeks off by that point.
I think what was happening is that guy told them, that guy in that letter, but secretly the story they were going to have was going back to Earth, and it turned out that Kirk had fought the Borg, and Picard isn't Picard, he's Locutus, and he kills Dr. Crusher. And they're like, but this is going to cost too much money. We're going to have to do this story that you told the person that we were going to do. Oh, damn it! How about you, Ross? When you watched Q-Who, did you have expectations that you'd see the Borg again?
I don't think I was thinking so clearly about how TV worked or how things worked. My overriding memory of the Borg was that they were completely scary and they were so strange. The idea that there was no individuality, that they were all sort of on a mission. They had that sort of insectoid, like hive mind, but they were still completely alien. It wasn't like a hive you understand. It's still their drive. They're very villainous. Their drive to get you, but they're also completely sort of abstract. They don't necessarily care about you. They don't hate you. They're just going to go through you and go over you. And I remember being quite sort of impressed by how scary they were. And my real memory of the Borg actually comes later with Iborg. I have really strong memories of watching Iborg and being interested in what happens to Hugh, and the whole idea of once he starts regaining his individuality, is it okay to use him as sort of a weapon or a vector for a weapon? But my memory of Best of Both Worlds is really the first half. I have very limited memory of watching the second half, so maybe I missed it. So probably only would have been 10 or 11 when it was on. So perhaps I just escaped me. I was out in the garden or something.
Have you seen part 2 now?
God, I hope so. No, I did. I watched it in preparation for this episode, and I had seen it. And it was very good. I very much enjoyed it. What I thought was really clever was the whole idea where they'd written a story whereby the writers weren't sure whether Picard was going to be coming back as a series regular for Series 4.
Yeah.
And they'd written a story whereby he could either return or not return, and either way would work. And I would have been equally impressed to have watched both. I might have been disappointed if he hadn't returned, but they'd set up another character to replace him, Riker as the captain and Shelby as the second. And it's like, wow, that's really clever. They've really had to put some thought into how we're going to make this work. And that was really impressive, I thought.
Yeah, because watching the part 1, if you weren't aware of that, the Riker subplot could seem a bit out of place for this story. Like, you think, well, why are we putting energy into this story when we could have extra time for the main story, which is the Borg? But actually, I really like the whole Riker the Riker story, and that his kind of his conflict with Shelby. I think that adds something to the story as a sort of a B plot to the main story. It works really well, and yeah, I mean, it works, and it would have worked really well if Patrick Stewart hadn't come back, I think, and Riker had gone on to be the captain.
I think what's great about this one is that it's not necessarily obvious, but it's massively Riker's story. This whole two-parter. I mean, when you get to First Contact, the effect it has had on Picard is so evident. In fact, previous to that, Iborg shows there's a lasting effect, and even Family. But this two-parter is massively, it's Riker's story all the way through, albeit with Picard sort of stealing some scenes because he's pretty superb as the whole Locutus thing. But because you go back to his whole thing about command, having a command or leaving a comfy position, and everything sort of considering there, and then being thrust into it. how the conflict with Shelby plans out with that. But yeah, it's definitely a Riker story. I always felt.
What I really like about that whole sort of that whole Riker story is that he makes the less adventurous decision in the end. A lot of the time, it's a TV trope that you get characters kind of talked into making the more exciting. You know, you get a character who wants to play it safe and they want to stick where they are because they're happy where they are, and another character will say, "Oh, you got to take it. You know, you only get one chance at life. You got to take life by the balls and live every day as it comes.
Never let go."
Yeah, take a chance. And this is a story where Riker's kind of like, you know what, I'm happy here.
Yeah,
I like being I like being on the first officer on the Enterprise. I think I'm going to stay here. And we're with Riker for this episode. We're sort of with him on that decision.
I've worked my ass groove into the first officer's chair. If I had to go to a captain's chair, I have to start over.
Yeah.
And there's that really excellent scene whereby he is talking to Shelby and she's sort of accusing him of being sort of, you know, not having that sort of zeal for, or that sort of drive to become the captain. And then it cuts really quickly to him talking to Diana. And he's like, what did happen to me? I used to do all those things. I was that guy.
The captain says Shelby reminds him of the way that I used to be. And he's right. She comes in here full of drive and ambition, impatient, taking risks. I look at her and I wonder what happened to those things in me. I liked those things about me. I've lost something.
And I thought that was a really nice moment where he's still being quite strong to Shelby and then coming out to Diana and being like, oh, crumbs, she was right. This is awful. Why aren't I doing all the things she said I should be doing? I thought that was a really nice little moment. And it sort of showed him that maybe he has grown a little comfortable on the Enterprise and he is enjoying his life and just being happy, and perhaps he needs to push himself a little bit harder.
And I like that, you know, Shelby's really antagonistic and she's there as a bit of a kind of a barrier for Riker in a way, but she's right. She kind of gets onto something and it does eat away at Riker. I think that's really good. She isn't just kind of being bullshit and sort of annoying him for the sake of being an annoying character.
Yeah.
She tells us something about that character, and that sparks a whole kind of story for Riker.
And she's a very well drawn character herself. She's a very interesting character, and it's a shame she never came back.
I would love.
They must have if they thought that she was going to take over the Riker position, the number one position. They must have had to invest a lot into her, more than they would have into just a regular, like, you know, one and done character or a one and done admiral who makes an appearance then never comes back. They must have had to think more about her backstory, more about her attitude, because potentially they were setting her up for a much longer run.
I like that she's not especially likable at first as a character. I guess because she's antagonizing a character that you know and love.
Also, she smirks.
Oh yeah, she's smug as hell.
She does.
But she's not. She's a good. Yeah, she's.
She's a jerk, but she's super talented.
Yeah, that's it.
But
she's like that,
and
she's like that kind of like that young, go-getting like manager that's coming to the and being promoted ahead of like people who've been there 20 years, and
but she's not.
They just hate her.
But also, she's never fucks anyone over.
No,
she's never mean to anyone. She doesn't have to be.
No, not at all. It's good as well to see a dynamic with Riker and a woman where Riker's not acting like a cartoon wolf, where his kind of eyes go out and stalks, and he goes, "Woo, woo, woo, woo," and then his heart starts going like that. But it's good to see that side of Riker too. I think that although the dynamic between Riker and Shelby is for the most part an antagonistic one, it's very watchable, and it's very interesting as well. And both characters kind of, especially for Riker, I think it gives us an insight into that character that we hadn't seen before.
That's a good point, because I think Riker's often he doesn't act all that much like a professional adult when there's an attractive lady on screen. like he's pretty unprofessional sometimes, and it's great to see him acting like the first officer on the flagship for the Federation rather than like a horny 17-year-old.
Do you think when Riker's playing his trombone, or he's got his trombone, and he tells a joke with a good one-liner, he goes like,
yes, I do think that. Yeah, he definitely does.
Anyway, he doesn't do that in this episode, does he?
Maybe he does it alone in his quarters just to cheer himself up.
Yeah.
Who's he telling the jokes to?
Bet you can't play a trombone, Shelby. Look at me now. But it's like a sadder. Yeah.
So we sort of touched on this a little bit. What are our sort of highlights of the episode?
Oh, for me, it's that moment at the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1 where we get that shot. They've beamed onto the Borg cube. Picard's been taken by the Borg. They don't know what's going on. They beam over there. And they see him, and they're like, "Oh, there's Picard! Oh, Picard, come over here! Come back!" And he turns to camera. We get that reveal that he's been Borgified, and it's a great shot where the sort of laser from his eyepiece hits the lens of the camera, and the music starts. And the music's really epic in this episode.
Yes, it is. The music, you're right, is creepy. One thing before that made me chuckle is that they put his clothes in a drawer.
I know.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Well, you never know when they might come in handy.
In case he wants them back eventually.
It sort of looks like the salad drawer in the fridge as well.
It's weird.
Keeping them cool for him.
Yeah. You expect to see like a lettuce next to them or something.
There's a bit earlier in the episode, and it's kind of the point where it really starts to get serious, is where they've been kind of umming and ahhing about whether this is the Borg for about the opening 10 minutes. They're on that planet, aren't they, looking at where the colony was, deciding whether it is or not. And I think if something scooped out a massive city, I mean, it's pretty sure it's the Borg. I mean, I guess you have to check, but But later on, there's a bit where a ship is being attacked. I think the USS Lala, perhaps.
Yeah.
And this is it. This is it when it's all going to go down. And Picard is he looks like he's almost frightened. Like it's not terrified, but he's very serious. Like they go into that ship at warp 9 as fast as they can. Like it's
pacing the bridge as they approach as well. He's done the intercept. He's literally pacing around the bridge like shit.
But it's great. That's the point for me where the episode really kind of kicks on, and like, this is the Borg. We're going to engage the Borg, and then they do, and then it's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately as soon as the episode starts, the music itself is like they're straight into it, and the music's quite ominous. If like sorry, Russ.
Sorry, there's quite a lot. It sounds like human voices almost. I thought there's like sort of. There has that sort of humanistic that huge sort of vocal quality to it. And I wasn't sure whether it was like voice recordings had been sort of merged together somehow.
Yeah,
very effective.
Mr. Worf, dispatch a subspace message to Admiral Hansen. We have engaged the Borg.
I think maybe it is. I think I'd read something about that on Memory Alpha. I think they bring in like a sort of a choral element.
It was a bit. I think it caused some issues at the time because Ron Jones, the composer who did the music, brought this in, and that was kind of like against the grain of what they like to do. But he went for it. They ended up approving it, and it's really effective.
Yeah,
it works so well.
I bet they hated it, but they didn't have any time to record because it's TV. It's like, oh, fine.
He was eventually fired from Next Gen, and it's a shame. It's like ridiculous because his music was amazing. The Best of Both Worlds soundtrack album is just incredible. It's an awesome listen.
Yeah.
So, I love it, and it's totally worth checking out on Spotify.
Okay.
One of my favourite moments, I think, is when after they've been through Wolf 359, they catch up to the cube again, and Riker Hales, and there has that little back and forth with Locutus, and he ends up saying, "Then take your best shot, Locutus, because we're about to intervene." And the way the music rises, he sits down, you scramble a code, Riker 1, you see the source of separation, and you think, right now we're going for it. And Riker's got a plan, and it's awesome.
We will proceed to Earth, and if you attempt to intervene, we will destroy you.
Then take your best shot, Locutus, because we are about to intervene.
Channel closed.
Reset. Subspace communications. Scrambler code, Riker 1.
Scrambler code, Riker 1. Acknowledged.
Shelby, report.
Ready for separation.
Make it so.
It's almost, to me, it's like that bit. It's like that bit in Star Trek 2 when Kirk beams back from the Genesis cave to the Enterprise, and you realise him and Spock have had this plan, and they're about to get into it again. And it's like that. It's like shit. Everything looked bleak, but now the good guys are back on it. We're going to get some kick.
Yeah, they had something all along.
Yeah,
they had an idea.
Yeah,
and it's going to work.
Yeah. That's the one. I just love that moment. I mean, most people probably know I'm a massive Riker fan. So this is a huge, great two-part because he just looks awesome so often in this.
He does do some good trash talk to the Borg at that point. That line where he says, "We're about to intervene."
Yeah.
Sassy.
Love it. And the battle bridge, I think, looks amazing in this. It looks so much better because previously it looked like the movie Enterprise bridge had been sort of just redressed a little bit, but they've done some nice new displays and everything. It just looked awesome.
That's good. I like the battle bridge.
Yeah,
it's cozy. It's nice. Yeah.
Do you have a?
I just any moment when the voice of the Borg cuts in. Just cuts in over everything. This is the voice of the Borg, and it's just absolute. You mean nothing to us.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard, Captain of the Starship Enterprise, Registry NCC 1701D. You will lower your shields and prepare to transport yourself aboard our vessel. If you do not cooperate, we will destroy your ship.
For that kind of race,
hairs in the back of your neck.
For that kind of race, that is meant to intimidate. That's meant to. It's an intimidation tactic, isn't it? So, despite them being sort of a Gestalt consciousness, they do that to frighten you.
Because why would they bother if they didn't care about you? Why would they even speak to you?
Right. If resistance really was futile, why even say that line to people? Because why would you care?
I think ultimately it's in on the off chance that people will just go, shit, yeah, okay, we surrender, and it just saves them
and roll over. Yeah,
but they did hail from a humanoid species, so there is still that is still embedded in them.
Yeah, and
they're also trying to recruit a human to be their voice. So maybe they must recognize the power of communication to an extent. Otherwise, that wouldn't be their plan.
I do remember when I watched it researching for this, I did feel, I think it was the point where Picard, before he's been turned, is on the Borg ship and he talks directly to the collective and he's saying about freedom and self-determination, and it comes back with freedom as irrelevant, self-determination. I think it's you'll be assimilated and we'd sooner die, and they go death is irrelevant. And it occurred to me, it's almost a shame about the whole Locutus thing because we lose that ominous chorus voice that they have. Without that collective voice, when you go down to a single voice, I don't know if you dilute it because it's still terrifying because it's a character we love is suddenly on it with them, but it just something so ominous about the collective voice.
So is that the point then? Is that previous to the Borg Queen, is that where they actually mess up the Borg?
The Borg have never been messed up. They're always brilliant.
Even towards the end of the voyage.
Yes. I don't think they messed it up. I think they have to try and do something different because the Borg, as an idea, they're really strong. But it's quite a singular idea, isn't it? If you don't develop it and change it, it could be very samey because they don't have much of a personality, as it were. And I suppose they need to have some way of making it a bit more interactive that the crew can interact with, and we can sort of we can observe as well. We can enjoy watching it. Otherwise, it could be it is more like watching a machine just go through the motions and be menacing and creepy, but it would never change. So I wouldn't think I wouldn't say they've spoiled it, but I think it had to be developed. Otherwise, we perhaps wouldn't have enjoyed it so much. God, that's very diplomatic of me.
I did read again. I read on Memory Alpha that they did want to bring the Borg back sooner than the end of season 3, but they'd struggled to come up with a story after how awesome Q Who is. They struggled to come up with a way of bringing the Borg back because the Borg were so unstoppable. How to kind of bring them back and tell a story where A, the Enterprise can survive, and B, it's not just a repeat of exactly what they did in Q Who. So, and it feels like that's maybe where the sort of Locutus idea came from, and then later on in First Contact we get the Borg Queen, and I think you're right in what you're saying, Ross. It's like you have to find a different approach to telling that story, and you can't just do Q Who like 7 or 8 times, but throughout the series, you need to be telling a different story, I guess.
I also think, particularly in Star Trek movies, they do find it very necessary to have a singular villain, kind of thing. It has to be a hero and a particular villain. I think there's only 2 movies where that doesn't happen. That'd be obviously the first motion picture and 4. Where, so you can't really argue for the success of not using a single villain between those two, because it's kind of either way, really, isn't it?
I think that's a bit sort of Wrath of Khan syndrome. Like Wrath of Khan was so successful, and it's such a it's the whole thing between Kirk and Khan. It's like we need a hero and a villain in each movie.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been the and see to varying degrees of success, I'd say. But, I don't know. When you watch Q Who, one of the terrifying things about the Borg is that they're literally just this relentless force. There's no singular thing you can pinpoint to them. There's no you can't argue them down. You can't appeal to anything. But as soon as you start to put a single face on
Kirk could argue them. I think Kirk could argue them as well.
He would explain
steam coming out of their ears.
Yeah.
But you're right. John Delancey has such amazing lines in Q Who that really stand out. I love that episode so much. It really proves that the Federation aren't ready.
And Admiral Hansen says it again in beginning of Best of Both Worlds. Hell, we're not ready.
The truth is, hell, we are not ready. We've known they were coming for over a year. We've thrown every resource we have into this, but still...
Building the Defiant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ross, did you have a favourite moment or a standout moment from Best of Both Worlds?
I think for me, this is going to sound, well, I'm obviously a Borg fan, but the menace of the Borg I thought was really apparent through this. And what I really enjoyed watching this, because you did in TNG, you see a lot of Riker, you see a lot of Picard, but you don't see a lot of the Borg in TNG, really. And I thought the Borg in this episode looked particularly scary, particularly had like a Hellraiser-esque feel about them, where their mouths are obscured or both their eyes are obscured. They look particularly creepy. And then in the sort of the HD remaster, their shields look great, just like frosted glass. Yeah. And I really got a great thrill out of actually watching the menace of the Borg unfold across the episode, because they, despite Locutus being their Achilles heel in this episode and him sort of, him being a doorway to defeating them, the Borg remained the same. They were relentless. They had that mission. They really did, come across as that really scary, relentless, terrifying presence. And I thought they were really effective. So for me, it was the Borg, and that does sound a bit lazy, but I got a real thrill out of watching it this time and just seeing how creepy they were.
That's a good point you make about their shields in this episode. We were talking about that, weren't we, Gemma? How, like, I know as we get later on into Voyager and in the movie First Contact, they sort of change the effect a bit. I don't think it's ever as quite as cool as the shield effect is in Best of Both Worlds. I really like that kind of. It feels like a solid barrier that appears in front of them, and I know it's kind of like it's probably a bit of a limitation of the effects at the time, but I don't know. It looks great.
There's one point where the camera's slightly behind one of the Borgs, and you can actually you see the reflection of the Borg in the shield. It just looks so cool. It's non-generic as far as an energy shield goes.
And I find such an overt barrier leaping up like that just really drives home the futility of the Federation weaponry.
Yes.
Whereas a standard sort of body-hugging glow fizzle thing, just wasn't as didn't have that sort of like effect that this does. So I also quite like when they beam in onto the bridge before they take Picard. They adapt to the phaser blasts, and Riker, because they've adapted, he charges at this guy. And Riker's a physically imposing man. He's a big bloke, and the Borg just literally like tosses him aside like he's nothing, which I think was quite. Again, that really sells the point home that so what, the Borg do not care. They're just here. They're going to get what they want. You shoot one down, another one comes up with his frosted glass shield, tossing your 12-foot first officer to the side, no problem. Knocks the Klingon down, got the captain.
One thing about Best of Both Worlds is why did they want Picard as their voice? Because in Q-Who, I guess they'll scan the ship, they'll know the crew and everything, but he doesn't go onto the cube in Q-Who, and in this episode, it's probably not the same cube that they met in the J25 system.
Yeah, system J25.
So I'm always just a bit curious as to why they chose him.
But they know about it, so they've obviously gained the information on Starfleet, on the organisation somehow. So they're presumably they know he's a big figure in there.
They say actually when they hail, you command the most powerful vessel in the fleet. So I think there's possibly that element is like if they give you the biggest, toughest ship, you must be pretty important. And there might also be like a psychological thing as well. They know the effect it'll have on the enemy if they take their best captain and turn him like that. So
there's probably an element as well that it's a contrivance. So,
you're absolutely
Patrick Stewart
right.
maybe was going to leave.
If they picked the captain of the Melbourne, probably wouldn't have been as compelling an episode.
I have to. An idea I had, which is completely non-canon, but I thought, well, what if Q put that idea into the Borg?
Wouldn't do that.
But to carry on the kind of trial of humanity and to test humanity and to test Picard.
Yeah, but would he do that without popping up?
Good point. But it's only an idea, but I like the idea of him.
Are the Borg aware of Q? I can't remember.
There's never anything that states the Borg have got any idea about Q. The nearest we come is that Voyager thing where we've got Q's son, and he orchestrates a Borg attack on the Voyager, and Q turns up and says, "Don't mess about with the Borg." And you kind of wonder, well, why not? You're Q. You can mess about with anybody. So...
Not Guinan.
Well, yeah, not Guinan.
No, God, no.
Guinan's escaped from the Borg.
Yeah.
Species triangle.
I suppose you could argue that, would the Borg have even been aware of humans if Q hadn't have thrown the Enterprise into the path of that Borg cube? So, is there an argument for saying actually Q is kind of responsible?
There are two things that are not in play at this point, but later on say that yes, A, they'll have assimilated the Hansons earlier than this, and B, that signal from the Borg in Enterprise in Regeneration. Archer specifically says, that signal will probably be picked up in the Delta Quadrant about the time Next Generation happens.
It would take at least 200 years for a subspace message to reach the Delta Quadrant, assuming it's received at all.
Sounds to me like we've only postponed the invasion until what? The 24th century?
hands.
I mean, he doesn't wink at the screen, but he may as well. I mean, I still love it. It's not as bad as when in Enterprise when is it Eric Sun, the Sun guy?
Oh yeah,
robots. To hell with genetics. Ooh, robotics.
Yeah.
All the time, Archer's like, one day they'll come up with a directive, a prime one.
Yes. They did have a habit of maybe assuming the audience really needed a point absolutely ramming home so that they could understand it. Apropos of Best of Both Worlds, what did you guys think to the Battle of Wolf 359, or which is the greatest off-screen Star Trek budget saving battle that we've seen? In retrospect, how do you think that plays out in part 2?
I don't know. I mean, I understand why they didn't show it because it would have been super expensive, but it is a bit of a jib.
It is, but then the power of turning up to this massive fleet battle, Enterprise, if you will, and it just everything's gone.
Yeah,
they've completely.
You're right. It still works.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, it would have been so cool to see it though.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time I saw Best of Both Worlds Part 2, thinking there was going to be a really epic space battle, and then being pretty gutted that we didn't get that. But actually, in retrospect, and particularly on this rewatch, you're right. I think it is really effective when the Enterprise shows up, and you just see the wreckage of the cube. Having gone through there, and you have to imagine that battle and how devastating the Borg cube would have been.
Cube. Yeah.
There's also part of me that thinks, if we had seen that battle, would it have looked all that great? And particularly by today's standards. I mean, they probably would have had. I mean, we know in TNG they really only have maybe 2 or 3 ships on screen at any one time,
and all on the sort of same plane as well.
Yes, exactly.
So very flat, sort of two-dimensional battle.
You would have had sort of one ship get destroyed, another ship would have moved up to take that one's place to sit motionless in front of the Borg cube, and I don't know. Maybe it's a lot more effective that we didn't see it.
Well, even when we do get a glimpse of it in the DS9 pilot Emissary, it literally is the ships tend to attack 1 or 2 at a time. It's like, why don't you all go in at once? But they do seem to be taking turns. I don't know.
Yeah.
At that point in Next Gen, I think also they only had that Excelsior model, the Reliant model, and the Stargazer model. So it wouldn't have looked a very varied fleet.
No.
I know they kit bashed a lot of wreckage, which you can do with wreckage, but if you wanted actual ships flying around, you needed sort of better quality models, I suppose.
Yeah. But it's like it's a cool idea. I mean, the Wolf 359 it's something that's kind of stuck in the memory, I think.
It's iconic now, isn't it? I mean, we all know what it is.
Yeah. And if they hadn't have built up this big battle happening, then you're getting back to that old thing which was very annoying in, say, the first couple of movies. Like, why is there one ship in the vicinity of Earth that can defend it? So thankfully they could at least gather about 40 ships to stand in between them. And then you have, let's say, the great psychological effect that has on the crew when they come through the wreckage.
Yeah.
The ship that Riker was offered command of, that's been destroyed.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's the last one Shelby reads off, the Melbourne, and everyone has a little bit of a pointed look.
Is that the one that the Admiral was on?
It's never made clear, but I'm going to guess so. He probably was. Melbourne needed a commander, so you might as well have used that one.
The battle is not going well. I think he says something like that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The fight does not go well, Enterprise.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about Shelby a lot, so that's all right.
That's right. He does have a little bit of a creepy line at the beginning, doesn't he? About...
Just an old man's fantasies.
Keep your eye on her, Jean-Luc. She's one very impressive young lady.
You seem rather taken with her, JP.
Just an old man's fantasies.
Hey, that's the last part of a man to work. The older you get, the more it takes control, I think. It's not the heart or the brain. It's the Johnson.
It's Roddenberry's vision.
The Hanson.
Hanson. Is he dead? He's dead.
Just from the waist down.
Steering back to the Melbourne, interestingly, a little trivia note, is in the wreckage, the Melbourne is a Nebula-class ship. In the DS9 pilot episode, it becomes an Excelsior class. Because the Excelsior model's more detailed. Purely a thing that they're going to blow it up and they wanted a more detailed model.
I think you'll find that makes everything... that makes DS9 non-canon. So, and everything from that point, and all of Voyager, I guess, as well. That's a shame.
Everything after the cage was non-canon.
You're right, yeah. You're right.
Everything after First Contact is set in a new timeline.
I suppose it... Yeah, I suppose it kind of is.
And in that film, the Borg go back and... That's when they go back.
Well, yeah, but presumably that they wouldn't have...
I don't know.
Let's
get the blackboard out.
The
Vulcans going back in time would create a new timeline. If I suppose it's so complicated.
But
it wouldn't have flown the ship if they hadn't been there to sober him the heck up. The Vulcans wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah. But then because you get that
potentially
episode.
Though, if the Borg hadn't been shooting down at Minnesota, the ship would have been ready to go and he would have flown up.
Yeah. And you get that there's that episode of Enterprise where Regeneration is it which I guess wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Borg going back in time in First Contact. So is Enterprise technically set in a different timeline to TNG? Because
no.
When you get to arguing separate timelines for series, it's a bit like, can we go back to talking about Admiral Hanson's Hanson?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's best not to overthink.
We can save talking about timelines for the Year of Hell episode.
Yeah, we haven't got the time to talk about timelines. We don't have the time.
Don't have time to talk about time.
So we've kind of covered some of our main headings here. How do we think then that this has influenced Star Trek since this two-parter?
I think it's influenced Star Trek in terms of we've had a lot more two-parters.
Yes, I put that too.
Yeah, it has become a bit of a trope since then, isn't it? To end or it did in TNG. Didn't they have quite a few two-parters to end the season?
They ended every season on a two-parter from then on, I think. Yeah,
and then Voyager did that. Voyager has a lot of two-parters in its run, doesn't it?
Well, not for the first season.
Episodes too. Well, not a lot, but two, I think.
Yeah, and DS9 has a three-parter,
and then it sort of has like 9-parters in season 7.
Yeah.
I put existential threats. It introduced existential threats to an existential threat to the Federation, that can't be argued with, and destroyed with arguing. Because they meet Nomad, who's very powerful, and they meet the Doomsday Machine, which is a super powerful machine. And they don't destroy the Doomsday Machine with arguing, but yeah, it's a threat they haven't. It's a level of threat they haven't met before, and you know, we've never seen anything quite like that. And the Borg go on to be a threat from that point onwards. We see the Borg in, you know, what happened to Wolf 359 is sort of the reason that Sisko is where he is when we need
it
him.
hangs over the Trek universe from then on, doesn't it?
Yeah,
we see it like that. That's why they developed the Defiant. Just the idea of the Borg. Everyone's, you know, you can say it's got this massive effect. Everyone knows about the Borg from then on.
Yeah. And you could argue as well. This is the most successful villain, a new villain species that TNG introduced. They tried it with the Ferengi. They didn't really sell as villains, did they?
Certainly not the way the Borg do.
No, and you know we have the Klingons coming in from from time to time in early TNG, but this was the first time they introduce a new villain that really sticks, and it's it's lasted through all of Trek really.
Resistance is futile could be a rule of acquisition, though, I reckon.
Yeah, it could. Yeah,
I think for me, one of the things that this introduces, the best of both worlds, is another level of vulnerability in Picard, because we know he's got that sort of fat, well, actually, we don't find out until the next episode about his family. And that the sort of vulnerability that introduces, and the idea that he hasn't got his own family, but he's happy enough with, his nephew, and that he has the Picard line ongoing, but that he has been sort of invaded and become this other species and has had this horrible, intricate connection with the Borg. That vulnerability plays out sometimes, and certainly it's like a key factor of First Contact, that he already is aware of the Borg and he knows them really well, and he particularly dislikes them because of the way that he has interacted with them. So that is ongoing as well. It's not just the Borg, it's Picard's relationship with the Borg, which is really well done.
And it introduces the concept of killing off a main character as well. The captain is in danger. I mean, in the original series, Kirk goes on dangerous missions, but I think this, there's the genuine potential that Picard could be killed, and from that point onwards, I think we get episodes where the captain's perhaps in more mortal danger than we've seen before, and I think in Voyager, the captain sort of does die. Maybe he comes back, but yeah, I think it changes it gives more potential to what you can do with the main characters and the captain character as well from that point onwards in terms of stories that you can have.
I often wonder what it must have been like in the US, because they literally had to wait months between part 1 and part 2. It must have been horrible. We had to wait a week, and that seemed like a massively long time to me and gave me nightmares. But they had to wait a month, and they had no idea. There was rumours about Patrick Stewart's contract talk stalling. They really didn't know if he was going to leave, what was going to happen. Whereas by the time we watched it, they were into Series 5. We were going to have Undiscovered Country come out in cinemas soon, so we knew, we knew Next Gen had gone on and Picard was all right, and stuff like that. So we didn't really have that same level, and it was still a torturous week to wait. So yeah, those poor guys in the US having to live through that.
I mean, I think Best of Both Worlds parts 1 and 2 have held up as the sort of peak of TNG. They're easily two of the best episodes, and that's obviously kind of had an effect from then on. I don't know if TNG ever quite hit that high again. I don't know if they ever quite nailed an episode quite like they did. Certainly the first part. I think you could argue that part 2 doesn't quite deliver the same level of excitement as part 1 does. But I think it's a good...
We are about to intervene. That is peak level excitement.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected, Ram. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know if TNG ever did anything quite as exciting as Best of Both Worlds again.
Maybe not as exciting, but there's still some cracking work that I would rate right up there as amazing stuff like Chain of Command.
Yeah.
Or All Good Things, I think, is like the point where they just say every lesson we've learned over the last 7 years we're going to put into one awesome two-parter to end it all.
Yesterday's Enterprise.
Yeah.
I know that's a one-parter, but story-wise.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention the fact that in part 2 he has a much bigger face mask than he did in part 1. Whether they just thought it wasn't big enough, and size matters, they're like, we want to plaster it right over his face this time. That little side mask, that ain't cutting it. But I liked it.
Well, that brings me to why did the chest piece have to have abs on it? That's what I want to know. Why do they put his uniform in a little drawer, and why do they have to have the abs on the bit covering his stomach? And they all have them.
The two very good questions.
It's like Roman armor. It's like armor, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
Roman armor.
It's like Roman armor, but they, that was for a reason. But
maybe
why
it's
does
maybe
the
it's a bit
Borg
more.
care?
Like we were talking about before, like maybe the Borg do have like a sense of panache. And, like,
the whole thrust of the Borg is they want to assimilate everyone, and then they will all be unified under their ideal perfection thing, to the point that they rewrite every drone's DNA to get it close to that perfection. So I guess part of that is having some well-defined abs.
Also, thinking about it, a Borg cube. It is like an S&M club with no music, isn't it? Thinking about it. So yeah, you mentioned some pumping electro dance music in a Borg cube.
But there's no safe word.
No, the safe word is futile. No, the safe word is futile. Futile.
I'm sure if you look on YouTube, someone will put the music over the, clipped all the scenes together on the ship and put the music over it. So. We can all have a look and enjoy that after we finished recording.
What do you guys think of the way that they ultimately defeat that Borg cube? The whole kind of sleep command, which weirdly, so the sleep command puts all the Borg to sleep. And then also makes the Borg cube explode. It's like, I don't explode when I go to sleep. Unless I've eaten something really suspicious. I don't want to go into that.
I suppose the drones that should be like maintaining the engines or something, or the power core or something aren't on.
Why is the
they're all
power
asleep.
core
so volatile.
I imagine
because normally drones wouldn't be sleeping on the job. It's okay.
I imagine there's one guy who's like on the screen. It's like, do you want the cube to explode? Yes or no? And he has to keep hitting no. But then he's gone to sleep. So
he's a self-destruct drone. He's pressing no. I thought the way that they dealt with the Borg was really intelligent, and I really liked the fact that they put all their effort at the beginning of part 2 into the deflector-dish weapon, which was a bit of a damp squib in the end because it didn't do anything, and at the end it was finding that sort of that way in through Locutus and through Picard, and it was putting them to sleep using a command subroutine rather than destroying them or defeating them with a show of force. It's just a really nice and intelligent way of dealing with an enemy that would otherwise seem relentless. They do have a little weakness, and we hadn't noticed it before. We know that we all knew they regenerated. They had the alcoves, but to actually put that together and be like, we'll use that as the way to defeat them. That's really intelligent. I thought that was a really clever way of dealing with it.
Sleep, Data.
He's exhausted.
Yes, Doctor. But if I may make a supposition, I do not believe his message was intended to express fatigue, but to suggest a course of action.
They couldn't have done any sort of way of doing it with force, because I think they'd already established the Borg as way too above that. There would be no credible way for them to suddenly say, oh, actually, we've just come up with this other crazy energy thing which we can do, and oh, the good, that's worked.
Yeah, you're right. It wouldn't have felt right to have defeated them, with a show of force. It had to be something like that, something kind of sneaky and clever.
Which that worked beautifully, but it's just that the easy out at the very, very end where it causes the cube to explode for some reason. I just think that's such a shame, and they could have used that in a different way.
Because they discuss saving it, don't they? Should we preserve it so we can study it? And Riker's like, no, blow it up.
In fairness, I think Riker completely makes the right call, because we see in the future, anytime you muck about with Borg technology, something goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
I
mean, you're right. There's no question there's no point where I was thinking, was that the right call? I mean, because you've seen what a threat the Borg. Oh, it's like yes, let it self-destruct.
Like, this stuff's totally inert. It can't possibly come back to life and hurt us. No, Riker definitely made the right move there, but it does. Yeah, like I say, it seems odd that it just explodes if everyone's having a nap.
But it's I like that. I mean, from what I'd read, they didn't have a solution to the story after they'd written part 1. They wrote part 1 came up with an incredible cliffhanger, and then part 2 was still to be written. It wasn't like it was a story they'd come up with in its entirety. So bearing that in mind, I think it's a pretty good resolution, actually.
I think Michael Pillar wasn't even necessarily. He was literally debating whether or not he was going to come back the following year. Riker's career storyline in that mirrored his own decisions whether he was going to stay on writing staff or go look for new challenges. So he literally just wrote up to that cliffhanger with no clue how anything was going to be resolved.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job, because they just wrote themselves into the most dramatic possible cliffhanger. And actually, if they'd sat there trying to work out a resolution first, we might not have had such a dramatic cliffhanger. Because they might have written something with an out.
Yeah, written the caveats in already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think without the way they did it, it works so well. When I was younger, one of the first VHS video purchases I ever made was Best of Both Worlds, that had been edited together into one long movie. And I have the Blu-ray now where they've done the same thing. So I'm very much used to watching it with no break. I watch the whole thing through as one story, parts 1 and 2. Even though there's a slightly disconcerting moment where after Riker says fire, suddenly his hair's slightly different, Crusher's hair's completely different, and the uniform fits her differently.
This is the kind of thing that Netflix should be all about. We should be sending them a tweet and be like, sort this out. We want the Best of Both Worlds connected version.
Yeah. Because to research this, I watched it in 2 parts on Netflix for the first time in years that I've actually watched it with a to be continued on screen.
So you heard that incredibly long music. That's like the longest. I imagine they had like I don't know. They were 10 seconds short. They're like, what can we do? Right, we need to extend the score.
Make it longer.
Yeah, exactly.
No, they still do that in the edited version.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, I hope that's true.
But I mean, you can't beat that awesome pan round Riker's face just before he gives Mr. Worf fire. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is. And one nitpick I have about this is that in the HD remaster, the new explosion that they have at the end, I don't like it as much as the original model effect explosion. There it is. I've said it. I just love model effects. There it is. That's my one bugbear with the HD remaster.
Well, there's nothing to stop you getting an old VHS player and watching an old video version.
Isn't there, Rick? Isn't there?
There's 25 years. That's what's in the way of that. 25 years back to 1995.
Now you made me feel quite old, Ross. Cheers.
Sorry.
Damn. Okay, I think that probably brings us up to the end. Unless anyone's got any final burning points they wish to raise?
I'm just really happy if my last point was a nitpick about how the CG explosion in the HD remaster isn't quite as good as the model effect explosion. Just feels that's the right way to to end.
I feel quite bad that my last statement was just a dig at Rick's age.
The perfect ending.
Yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ross. It's been a really good discussion.
I have really enjoyed it. Such a pleasure to be on 10Backward. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I look forward to hearing your next podcasts.
Excellent. Did you want to just let any listeners know where they can find you on the interwebs and plug your awesome Snap Trek podcast?
Yes, thank you. So I am Taborg at STRTRK1701 on Twitter, or you can find Snap Trek Podcast, the Star Trek game show podcast, or we compare 2 episodes of Star Trek at Snap Trek on Twitter.
Right. Well, thank you very much for everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this, and we shall be back again with another episode.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye.
Do you realize how incredible this is?
It's tradition. You ever noticed her bum? What? Her bum.
Oh no!
I will say
Fewer things. Okay.
Enough of this self-indulgence.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, our website is www.lowerdecksradio.co.uk. You can reach us on the Twitters at 10Backward, 10 being the number and backward being the word backward. We're also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/10Backward podcast. You can also email us at crew@lowerdecksradio.co.uk. On a personal, individual level, my Twitter is @WiltHerland. Rick Everson's Twitter is @TrekFanRick. And Rick Palmer's Twitter is @Mr. Imhotep.
Hi, thank you again for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you might consider supporting us. We now have a Patreon where people can pledge small amounts to fund our ongoing projects like keeping our website up to date, new audio equipment as we're going along, and potentially opportunities to expand our content. You can go look at this at patreon.com/lowerdecksradio. If you don't feel you can donate but would still like to support us, we would love it if you could subscribe to us on however you get your podcasts, through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or we're on various third-party apps. And if you could leave us a review on any of those, that would be fantastic and we'd be very appreciative.
Thanks again for listening, and please tune in for more podcasts from the 10 Backward crew.
Laddie, don't you think you should rephrase that?
10 Backward.
10 Backward.